The Trump stock market crash continues. Canada lost 62,000 full-time jobs in March, and Alberta nurses get a 20% raise, and of course, election 2025. All that and more in our really big show today. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. On the phone with me, Ian Burns from Ottawa, our managing editor. Look at the beautiful blue sky here in the central Okanagan. Traffic flowing nicely here in Kelowna. And a beautiful sky. I just did the big white snow report. The last couple days of skiing takes place here in Kelowna this weekend. So, and it's got a big concert up on the hill. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan. How are things looking out there in the nation's capital?
It's a little bit chillier, but I can see blue sky, so that's a
There
win,
you go.
isn't it?
Wishing blue sky all across Canada. How's that, eh? We start off with something that's not so great, though. We start off with the unemployment rate in Canada and BC up as the national economy loses 33,000 jobs. And that was offset with part-time jobs because there were 62,000 full-time jobs that were lost, though. But it was offset with an increase in part-time jobs, which is not a great stat, though. We got a little map here to show you. We're going to put up this map here across Canada here that shows you where most of those BC unemployment rate up 0.1%, up in Alberta as well, and actually Saskatchewan actually down, and then there you go. High in Ontario at 7.5% unemployment rate. That's pretty high. PEI at 7.5, and 10 in the Rock. The Rock, always people looking for jobs out on the Rock. That's why they go across Canada to look for jobs.
Well, but like you say, Ontario is very high, and also Prince Edward Island there at
Yeah,
7.5%. I mean,
that's not unusual
it's
for the
it's it's
Atlantic
pretty.
provinces, but yeah.
It's just pretty high. The thing is, Canada, compared to a lot of other Western economies, does kind of tend to run a fairly high unemployment rate. It's usually a bit higher than my benighted, impoverished homeland, where it can be, three percent often in the UK, like extremely tight labor market over there. I don't know about lately, but yeah, I mean it tends to be high-ish, but obviously this is starting to get into quite sort of dodgy territory, isn't it? With
And
when you start getting to the high single digits, then you have to worry. And for Ontario, I mean, I don't know if that's related to the auto sector already, because obviously they can lay people off at the drop of a hat, can't they? If they have any sort of fears. So I wonder
most
if it's related to that.
most of the trade stuff won't show up until the May report. Most of the trade stuff won't show up in the May report. So this is a looking back report. This is looking back at March, right? So a lot of that won't start to show up. So these numbers are bad going into this trade war. These numbers are going bad, and this is where the economy has been. And this is the thing that when they were trying to tell us, the Liberal government trying to tell us that the economy is great, the numbers don't support that. The numbers do not support that. And in British Columbia as well, right? We've had a higher unemployment rate. Even in Kelowna here, we've seen it jump from 5.3 to 5.8, and like not a lot of trade war effects here. Even in Kamloops, up from 4.8 to 5.6. Chilliwack is actually the winner there. It's actually down a little bit. There you go. So BC not doing well as well, and the bad thing is that like the offset was part-time jobs. 62, this is the part that people should realize, 62,000 full-time jobs were lost. And that was offset by the part-time jobs.
And also, worst affected is men, older men. That's the worst
Yeah.
affected demographic, and they tend to have the most skills in terms of if you want to look back at the auto sector, it tends to be that sort of demographic. The sort of manufacturing, they tend to be an older age group on average, and it's pretty sad because once you lose those skills, they're not really coming up from the younger generations, so it's quite worrying. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, it's going to be next month is when we see this month's. But if you remember, this is March, and if you cast your mind back to March, all of these tariffs were the tariff fears were very much ongoing and the reactions to them. So this does factor in some of the trade war malarkey. But now that we have a little bit of certainty, but I mean, do you ever have certainty with Donald Trump? I don't think that's true, but it seems that in general we seem to have more certainty now since Liberation Day has passed.
Yeah.
So
But
probably next month will be the time to get like a clearer look at it.
But the unemployment rate in Canada has been over the 6% mark for quite some time. The economy has not been great. I mean, that is a fact. And here we have Vasi Kapelis of CTV, one of the better journalists out there, talking to Anita Anand on like why should Canadians trust the Liberals? And she asks a good question. And this is a longer clip, but it's worth listening to.
For a number of years. I've covered CETA. I've covered the Indo-Pacific strategy, a lot of different efforts to diversify trade that ultimately resulted in the same portion of our goods and services heading to the United States today as did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, give or take a couple of percentage points. 3/4 of what we send, no matter what your government did to try and amplify trade with other countries, still goes to the United States. So what new plan will you put forward to Canadians to do the opposite? And why should Canadians trust that your government can do that when it hasn't been able to over the last decade?
Actually, we are the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. So the first step is going to be to leverage each and every one of those trading relationships. The second step is going to look internally and make sure that we are dismantling internal barriers to trade, which could add up to $200 billion to the Canadian economy. So there are steps that we will take immediately as a result of the very devastating announcement relating to tariffs that President Trump has made over the last number of weeks. But make no mistake, this is about reordering trade relationships. This is about developing stronger trading relationships within Canada and with other partners. And that's exactly what this moment requires us to do. Regardless of the decisions that the United States is taking, this moment signifies a time where we need to broaden our trade relationships and leverage our natural resources and critical mineral sectors. Canada has everything that other countries want. Now will be the time to leverage those critical minerals and raw materials in particular, so that the United States and every other country that wants those minerals knows that there will be a price to pay when you want to trade with Canada.
But with great respect, Minister, my question wasn't about how many free trade deals we have. I pointed out that I've covered all of the ones that your government has signed over the last decade. When you raise the issue of leveraging, I think Canadians would wonder, why hasn't it been leveraged before? Like, why does it take this crisis to leverage trade deals that have been in place in some cases for a number of years? And if you couldn't leverage it over the last decade, why should they believe you will going forward?
Well, because they saw that we signed a free.
There you go. You can go to CTV and watch that full clip, and she just, like, I guess spins her wheels a little bit in there. So,
Anita Anand, as everybody says, supposedly the smartest and most competent person in the Liberal Party, pretty much, but of the ministers, and yet within about five or 10 seconds or whatever of her answer to that question, she uttered an obvious falsehood when she said we're the only economy in the G7 that has free trade agreements with every other economy. That's false. There is no free trade deal with the United Kingdom because of the dairy sector and the supply management system, which Pierre Poilievre, Mark Carney, Mr. Bloc Québécois all love and talk about in glowing terms, as it destroys our hope of a trade deal with Britain, who apparently we're going to rely on to bail us out of this quandary that we're in with the United States. So I just mentioned that off the bat, just an obvious falsehood that anybody could Google in 10 seconds and get the answer to. But again, with the distraction techniques and the answers, it's just, why not just answer the question? That would be nice, wouldn't it? But
yeah, and again,
refusal from Anita Anand, the glorious, esteemed Anita Anand, that somehow doesn't know how to answer a question or tell the truth.
And if we do have all these trade agreements, why are we so heavily reliant on the United States? And why, if we know that we have all these resources, have we stifled our resource sector for the past 10 years? So those are the questions that I would ask next. Like, we've had the opportunity to get, when the Japanese were here begging, when the Germans were here begging for our LNG, we said there was no business case, and that would be diversification of our resource sector. They refused to do it.
Yep, and they're in Hanover right now, sort of representatives of the federal government, Hanover in Germany, to speak to all. It's like one of the biggest. It's one of the biggest trade fairs in the world, if unless it maybe is the biggest actually. And I was listening on the radio today, and they're talking about they're interviewing Germans, and guess what the Germans said? It's not going to shock anyone. They said, "Yeah, we really want your energy." It's like, yeah, they still want it. Of course they do, because they got absolutely shafted by the Americans and the Russians. They kind of got caught between the two of them when they had that proxy war, or still having that proxy war in Ukraine. The Germans were like the biggest losers of that war, other than the Ukrainians, because they lost their entire industrial model. And then they came over to Canada and said, "Pretty please, could we have some of your energy?" And yeah, Justin
And
Trudeau
what's
said no.
and what's missing from Mark Carney and the Liberals is the word LNG and oil and gas. You know what I mean? Like building the pipeline. And they still say that they're going to keep Bill C-69. So I don't understand. They talk about energy, but there's lots of different forms of energy, and like solar and wind and that stuff. But again, we've talked about this many times. Those are our B-rated players right now. They may become superstars in the future, but right now, our stars, our Wayne Gretzky's and Marilyn Lemieux, our oil and gas, LNG, uranium, all those things, which and our mining sector, all those things which have been put on the bench and sidelined.
And they're the things that our friends, who Mark Carney and the Liberal Party, and to be fair, a lot of the Conservatives as well, they keep saying that like our friends now, the Europeans really, and the sort of friendly nations in East Asia like Japan and Korea, they're the people we have to rely on now. They're our ticket out of this crisis with the United States, and they want LNG and oil and like you said, uranium and all the rest of it, potash, minerals, like the useful stuff. That's what they want. They don't want, not that we can even manufacture solar panels at scale anyway, not the kind of economy that could do that. But they don't want things like solar panels. They don't want hydrogen like we try to give the Germans. They're not bothered about that. They
Well, we
want the
don't have
real
it.
stuff that works now.
We don't have any hydrogen to give them, so I'm not sure what we're talking about. It's kind of like the semiconductors when Mark Carney was talking about that yesterday, talking about semiconductor trade. Like we barely make any semiconductors. It's marginal at best. And to talk about it like, well, I think once he referred to it as one of the biggest industries that the U.S. buys most of its semiconductors from us. I'm just like, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, that
lots
was an enormous blunder, wasn't it?
lots to talk about in election 2025. Where here's our election 2025 coverage. In our first bit there, Mark Carney responds to the U.S. Tariffs on automobiles. And this is anything outside the CUSMA agreement. So that remains to be seen what that really means. So we're going to play a little clip here from Prime Minister Mark Carney.
As I told President Trump during our call last week, Canada will respond to the U.S. auto tariffs. And today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the U.S. approach, with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement, and on the non-Canadian content of CUSMA-compliant vehicles from the United States as well. Our tariffs, though, unlike the U.S. tariffs, will not affect auto parts, because we know the benefits of our integrated production system. And they will also not affect vehicle content from Mexico, who is respecting the CUSMA agreement. And as well, we are developing a framework for auto producers in Canada to get relief from these counter tariffs as long as they maintain their production and investment in our country. Importantly, every single dollar raised from those counter tariffs, our counter tariffs, which could reach around $8 billion before remission, will go directly to our auto workers and the companies affected by those tariffs. And that's on top of a $2 billion fund that we announced last week to build a made-in-Canada auto sector, a fund that a new Liberal government would implement should we be elected.
So I'm still puzzled on the Canadian auto sector. I know that I mean, it's all U.S. automakers, and there's a couple of Japanese automakers in there, but we don't have a Canadian automaker. And again, I'll reiterate, if we don't get rid of the EV mandate here in Canada, all those automakers will leave to south of the border, regardless.
Yeah, well, and they have other reasons to go there, don't they? Like, they're being incentivized in a huge way. It's like carrot and stick. They're being offered lower taxes and lots of other things, lots of other perks, but then they're also being threatened with essentially making it impossible for them to do business unless they're in the United States.
And then critics of what Mark Carney is saying here are saying that he's trying to, even if there it doesn't seem to be a lot, like Canada kind of got skipped in this tariff round here, but he's been accused of trying to amp up the trade war because it actually benefits the Liberal Party at this time.
Well, there's no doubt about that, really. I don't think the polls certainly strongly suggest that anyway, that this trade war has resurrected the Liberal Party, which was looking pretty much dead on arrival, wasn't it, before Trump decided to come out with a lot of nonsense.
And here you go. In the next one, we talk about the media all the time. Bill C-18 suffering or causing crushing blows to independent media outlets like ourselves, where they've taken away our audience of 200,000. We don't get any government funding. CBC gets the bulk of the government funding, but a lot of the legacy media outlets get a lot of the funding from the government as well. And here is Mark Carney coming out to make sure that CBC gets more money during the election to even compromise them more. So he's saying that they're going to give them, I'll let you speak to it, because I have a tough time talking about it.
Yeah, well, he's going to give them $150 million that he said an initial $150 million. So the promise of much more on the horizon.
Yeah.
And he also said that he's going to empower their leadership, whatever that means. I mean, that is essentially a meaningless thing to say, isn't it? But we'll see what that actually means.
You mean that the same leadership that took bonuses just before Christmas when they laid off a bunch of staff? That empowered leadership?
Well, yeah, they need to be rewarded. It was really hard for them for a long time. They had to take a lot of criticism for that, and they've probably got PTSD. So I think they need to be empowered, and they need to get the lion's share of this $150 million, obviously. What else did he say? So he said more local news, more local reporters and bureaus, so that we can benefit from CBC's peculiar perspective on the world and its peculiar priorities about what should be the main story. So expect lots of things about, well, maybe I'll just not say that. And he said it in Montreal, I should add. He said it in Montreal, and it was packed. It was all in French, basically. There was a little bit in English, which is a gigantic insult to the people of Montreal, because there's loads of people in Montreal that speak English and are sick of being forced to speak French and listen to French. But yeah, the obligatory Quebec. There was a lot of that. And, protecting Quebec from Trump's cultural imperialism and the usual nonsense that you hear in relation to Quebec, and talking about Quebec as a nation and all the rest of that absolute garbage that probably most people are sick of hearing about. But he went over there and did it because he wants to win ridings in Quebec, and I think he probably will.
Yeah, there you go. No mention of Bill C-18 in his speech, though. Bill C-18 continues to be another number one position for Canada, the only G7 nation. They talk about the G7 a lot. The only G7 nation that does not allow news on the social platforms of Facebook and Meta. And at the same time, they said they're going to protect us from this Meta, the evil, demonic website there. But they're now spending money, millions of dollars, on that same platform because they said you can't put news on there. We're just like, wow.
I mean, the hypocrisy there. I mean, I've said this before, but I still don't know how to kind of get over that obstacle, so to speak. That the hypocrisy is so enormous that I can't even begin to fathom or like understand it or process it because it's so blatant, it's so gigantic, and it's so shameless. This hypocrisy from the Liberal Party that I just, what do you do when you're faced with something like that? It is the big lie, as we said. And that's why the big lie is so effective because like sometimes you can just completely blindside your opponents by just being kind of extravagantly hypocritical as the Liberals are being here. But obviously, the thing as well, like I haven't said, he didn't mention Bill C-18 because the media outlets that are propped up by taxpayers' money are by and large liberal with a lowercase l, and that tends to translate to Liberal Party support. So the Liberal Party is very contended by the status quo in Canada's media landscape because people that have different opinions from the Liberal Party are by and large expelled and punished, and they're not funded, while their Liberal sympathetic rivals are. So this is just a pretty straightforward buying of the media during an election as well. It's the kind of thing that if it happened in some tin pot African country, the UN and representatives probably from Canada would be issuing statements about how disappointed they are and how they hope that the regime will adhere to democratic norms and not try to bribe the media during an election. But obviously, because it happens in Canada with the Liberal Party, there's no peep. It's all about fighting misinformation. It's an absolutely great thing. So let's all clap.
I did an interview yesterday with a former candidate for the federal NDP, and I asked him about Bill C-18 because he's coming out in support of the Liberals. I did ask him about Bill C-18, and he went around, ran around the rosy. We're going to talk about it later, though. It'll come up later. I know it's tough things to grasp for a lot of the viewers we have here, but Bill C-18 basically suppresses all media outlets in Canada. Like 50% of traffic has dropped in Canada. 50% of revenues in most media outlets has dropped as well. But some are being compensated and some are selectively being compensated. Others are being just choked off and basically beholding. And Mark Carney, and in a question that was asked of him the other day was, like, better watch your questioning because your subsidies will go away. So they're definitely using that as well to make sure the media understands who's paying the bills.
Yeah, I mean, it basically what it does as well is it kind of like fossilizes the status quo. So every media outlet that existed and was kind of doing okay before the subsidies is in a similar position now, just about, because they've lost social media in effect. They've lost Facebook and Instagram. So it's very hard for like a newcomer, a smaller outlet to break through because it's very hard to get your message out if you're not on Facebook. So the status quo love it because they get to retain their comfortable perch because they've lost traffic, but because of the lack of Facebook. But they don't need to break through. Like lots of people already know who they are and will go to their website anyway. Plus, their reported salaries are being subsidized by the taxpayer. So it's okay. They can take the hit and they can, in many cases, they can have like a larger share of what's left of the audience. So they're quite delighted about it. And then the federal government obviously gets to basically erect a cordon sanitaire around the journalists and the outlets that they like, and they keep out the ones that they don't like or don't know. And it's usually the latter. Just people that they don't know, they can't predict them, can't predict what they're going to say. They can't influence them or control them. So they don't want them anywhere near the government or the Liberal Party or anywhere near the electorate, which is another thing. And here we are. It's a way to control the message and control the media. And simultaneously, obviously, the Liberal Party is interested in extending its tentacles into X, aka Twitter, YouTube, and all the rest of it, they want to get in there and they want to be able to control or at least kind of police to some extent social
Right.
media and every like just some random Joe who has a YouTube account and has an opinion about the Liberal Party. They want to be able to control that because of the new word that they learned a few years ago, misinformation. That's their justification. But the reality is that they effectively get to decide who exists as a media outlet and who gets to scrutinize what they do.
CBC did a story on Mark Carney's father there and his ties to Fort Smith and Northwest Territories Indian Day School.
Yeah, that's quite a peculiar thing for the CBC to have done, if I may say so myself. I mean, it's this is like, the CBC, we were talking earlier about the perspective that they represent. They essentially represent a kind of hyper-liberalism, which is, that's an extraordinarily obscure minority position. It's an extreme position in global terms that essentially nobody on this planet subscribes to. But in countries like Canada and a couple of other Western countries, the elite are very interested in this philosophy and this view of the world that I'm just calling hyperliberalism. You can call it what you want. Some people call it wokeism or whatever. But in that philosophy, it's perfectly normal to look at things that your dad did or said 60 years ago. Now, to most people, most human beings on this planet, that's an extraordinarily strange thing to do. But in hyperliberalism, that's legit, especially if you can find something that you can call racism. And that's what they've done with Mark Carney's dad, because Mark Carney gave an interview to the CBC where he spoke about culturally retarded children, in his words. And he spoke about children from native backgrounds who don't speak English and don't go to school and all the rest of it, because his dad was a Catholic teacher up in the Northwest Territories. And then they've also highlighted that he complained about a royal commission in 1996 that failed, in his perspective, to present a balanced view because it invariably cast, these are his words, Aboriginal residential schools in an unfavorable light. So,
That's
I
because he
would say that's
ran one.
perfectly normal. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He
Because he
was involved
ran
in
one of
running one.
those Aboriginal schools that were residential schools that definitely have been caused a lot of grief for Canada here.
Absolutely. But I would just say his opinion is from 1996 and also 1965. Those are the 2 years that the CBC have looked at for things like said or done. Completely uninteresting opinions, like totally middle of the road opinions at those periods in history. I'm sure if Robert Carney was around today and involved in the sort of public sector or whatever in any way, he would adjust his opinions because that would be the only way to remain as a member of Canada's elite. You have to change your opinions on things like this. So he would. Time, that I just find it a waste of time, really, that CBC has done this. But obviously, their kind of quasi-religious view of the world demands that they do this kind of thing and look at people's parents and what people's parents did 60 years ago. So there you go.
The Toronto Star's Brian Lilly did an opinion piece and saying Carney tells another fib and the man can't recognize the truth. He said that we avoided a recession in 2008 thanks to him, but the Bank of Canada declared a recession. Yeah, Mark Carney definitely not. CBC would call them couch truths. That's a nicer way to say it, right? Couch truths. Hey, which would you rather be accused of lying or a couch truth? Which one sounds better to you?
Yeah, get me on the couch. But I think like the reason that he's the reason that he's uttered a falsehood here, let's put it that way, on this subject is because this is absolutely central to the Mark Carney mythos. It's absolutely at the like bang in the center of his sort of resume is when he
Yeah.
was the Bank of Canada governor at this exact moment in history after the financial crisis. Basically, everything about his campaign to be prime minister rests on the general public's perspective of him as a kind of hero during that period, because he was, generally speaking, a failure at the Bank of England. The best you can get in terms of reviews was, oh yeah, he was all right. That's about the best you can get for the Bank of England. The rest of his life, he spent at Goldman Sachs and, Brookfield Asset Management, all of these big sort of corporate monsters that you don't really want to brag about having worked for. So everything in his desire to rule this country rests on that. It rests on him being the superstar governor of the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, that rescued the Canadian economy. So there is no way that he's going to back down on that, and I would expect him to exaggerate and tell lots more fibs on that particular subject.
Yeah, definitely the cornerstone of what I hear from lots of people, just like, well, he was the Bank of Canada governor and he saved us from this and that, and the English, the UK, definitely not fans of him when he was Bank of England governor. Yeah. Jagmeet Singh, he hasn't done a lot here, but here he is bringing back the Canadian savings bond. He called them war bonds, but I remember them as Canadian savings bonds. We used to buy them for the kids all the time. And, the Canadian savings bonds in denominations of $100, they stopped selling Canadian savings bonds back in 2017. They halted the sale of that because they said it's no longer cost effective to sell these bonds. And I think at that time, that in 2016, they paid an interest rate of 0.8%, not even a full percent, right? But they did in 1981, they paid 19.5%. when inflation was rampant. So he wants to bring those back. And he said bonds could be sold as little as $100. It's not a new idea. It's an old idea. And it says, according to the government, it says it costs like $80 million to administer these bonds. So it said it's way more easy to go to the markets as opposed to the individual people. But, Jagmeet Singh says that it would be great for national unity. So, I was a fan of the savings bonds. We used to buy them for the kids, right? They were a great savings vehicle for the kids, but I don't know.
I think like the world of finance has kind of moved on a bit from like war bonds. I don't think that it's generally in the finance world. I don't think it's looked upon as a particularly like efficient or useful way to raise revenue anymore. But I mean, obviously, if you're in a war, then the capital markets go absolutely insane, don't they? And it becomes a completely different proposition. So maybe if we were in a literal war, you might want to do something like war bonds. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty sort of moot, isn't it, when you're not actually in a shooting war?
Yeah. Not much for ideas out of but here, and to be fair to the NDP, we got some clips here to play. This is one of their latest ads. We got a couple ads here to play, and this is the one here, Solidarity Forever. I'm going to play this clip.
Solidarity forever. The union makes us strong. Woo! So, solidarity. So, solidarity. So, solidarity. Woo!
There you go. You got to watch those hand gestures, Jagmeet.
I think what was really good about that is that nothing about that at all was cringe. It was 100% cringe free, wasn't it?
We got another one here to see if we got one here with our friend Premier David Eby recommending Jagmeet Singh, and the NDP federally and provincially are related.
Hey, I'm here with Jagmeet Singh. He's the leader of Canada's NDP. His team from BC, the NDP MPs, were part of a national team that helped deliver pharmacare, helping Canadians afford medications, in some cases even get them free, dental care, so they could get their teeth fixed, the basics for Canadians. So you're gonna have a chance out there, you're gonna see some NDP candidates in your community. Be sure to re-elect NDP MPs to make sure they're out there advocating for Canadians every day.
Great to see you, Jagmeet. Thanks so much. Thank you for the support. It means a lot. And for all the great work you're doing for British Columbia.
You bet, man.
Appreciate you.
In it for you. Two men with no ideas. How's that? That's my headline for them. Two men with no ideas.
That also amazingly didn't have any cringe, did it? It was remarkable. I mean, my immediate response to that is, why have you got your hands in your pockets, David Eby? Get your hands out of your pockets. I'm not usually one for that kind of thing. And obviously, from time to time, I enjoy putting my own hands in my pockets. But you're doing a little video, like telling people who to vote for in an election. Get your hands out of your pockets, for God's sake.
And we do like to have fun with this news hour, the Really Big Show. I would say, get your hands out of our pockets, Mr. Evie.
Also, like, how low energy was that? It's like I'm not getting the impression that David Eby particularly likes Jagmeet Singh or the NDP or the federal NDP. I've got a feeling David Eby's probably going to vote Liberal in this election on a personal level. So I don't know.
And then this headline is from the Western Standard, and a lot's been said about this. Jagmeet Singh had picked up a influencer, was an OnlyFans star there, and it was riding around on her campaign bus until it was found out she made some disrespectful Holocaust video. Then she was booted off the bus. So there you go, Jagmeet Singh, looking for people to vote for him.
What where have you got this screenshot from? What's the publication? Can you remember?
Western Standard.
Western Standard, right? That explains the puns. Willing to bend over backwards for supporters.
There you go.
Nice one.
Again, a little bit of comedy there, I guess. And then this one from the Globe and Mail. This is just an opinion piece. You can go and read that. I think you got to have a subscription. Mark Carney will not make Canada prosperous. And that's, he keeps saying that same thing over and over again, that he's going to make Canada the most rich nation in the G7. It's got a long ways to go on that one.
I mean, yeah. Well, he said he wants the big fastest growth in the G7. The G7 is composed of Canada, the US, and countries in the EU, really, isn't it? And I think Japan is also in there.
Yeah. UK.
Japan. I mean, these are all stagnant economies, except for the US. There's only one economy in that whole group that's dynamic, and that's the United States. So really, when he says fastest economy in the G7, it means fastest growing economy. It means let's grow faster than the US. I mean, that's a big ask, isn't it? So we'll see about that. It's possible. It is possible to do that, but it would mean changing a lot of the Liberal Party's policies, really, economic policies.
And that is our resource sector, and we've talked about that a million times. So another poll with another drop of blue, as you said yesterday, another drip showing that some gains being made by the Conservatives.
Yeah, that is it's an interesting one, but it's an anomaly for sure. You can't say it's not, and it's only 2 points, so that would probably not translate into a workable minority even. That would probably translate into a Liberal NDP union of some kind, I would imagine, some kind of relationship again. Like the Tories, that's the problem. They can't just sneak past on 42 points or whatever. They did that, if you remember, on 2 occasions. 2 out of the 3 elections that Justin Trudeau, supposedly won. The Tories actually got more votes, but it's not enough. It's like you have to really win the ridings, and you've got to win them. You've got to win by almost like 10 points or something like that as the Tories, if you want to have a proper government, a proper majority. So even if this is accurate, it's not good news for Pierre Poilievre, I don't think.
And then just another clip here showing the crowds, because a lot of people are really disappointed with the polling, but they're starting to show off and say the crowds that Pierre Poilievre is drawing. And the reason I put it up there is because Pierre Poilievre will be in Penticton tomorrow. So if anybody wants to go out and see him here in the Central Okanagan or the South Okanagan, he will be in Penticton. That information is on our website. You can go find that information.
Yeah, I saw some of that one in Oshawa, just a little bit of it, and he's actually kind of funny. He actually has he's quite witty. He's got quite a sort of quick response to things, and there's quite a few funny moments where he's talking about somebody had an apple in the crowd or something like that. It's kind of it's a shame because nobody would really think about that with Pierre Poilievre. Like in general, he's portrayed as like this angry little dork, isn't he? Who's like still sort of 17 and he's crying about things. But he is actually he has like quite a lot of wit and quite a lot of humor. But I think he hasn't used that enough.
He is
on the big stage.
He is a very effective speaker. He is much more polished. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time, much more polished than Mark Carney. Mark Carney's still with the ums and ahs, and because it's like he's trying to think of the answer, and sometimes I think that's where he gets himself into trouble and says those couch truths. Whereas I think Poilievre more polished and knows what he's saying.
Mark Carney, I think he's a bit insecure, isn't he? He often like touches his face. Have you noticed that? He has like little ticks. He's almost like he's an insecure guy trying to act like Dirty Harry. That's basically my final analysis.
I wouldn't have given him the Dirty Harry reference, but
trying to act like Dirty Harry. So a guy who's very insecure or somewhat insecure on stage and has adopted the Dirty Harry persona to try and get through it.
There you go. I interviewed a former NDP candidate that ran in the riding that is Tracy Gray from the Conservatives and Stephen Fuhr for the Liberals, and both of them, well, Tracy Gray, I think MP in that riding for a couple of terms, and Stephen Fuhr won that riding back when he beat Ron Cannon out in that riding. But he's running again, and this was the NDP candidate, but I think he ran against, I think it was Tim Krupa that was the Liberal candidate that one time. I think it was about a 45-minute interview, because he's come out in favor of Stephen Fuhr, and he's asking NDP to stand down and vote Liberal. And I got a small clip here to play for you, because I asked him a bunch of questions. I did ask him about accountability and transparency. We're just going to play a small clip from that. You can go on Kelowna Now or our Now Media Group YouTube and watch that full interview. But we're going to play a small clip here just at the end. Justin Trudeau ran. I mean, a lot of people saying Pierre Poilievre accuses the government of being broken and the country being broken. Justin Trudeau, when he ran in 2015, that was basically his campaign ad. The country's broken, right? I don't know if you remember. I can get it for you if I need to send it to you. But he also said he ran on accountability and transparency. And I think that has been one of the things that has frustrated so many in Canada. Because even one of the reasons the government was prorogued was because they wouldn't release those documents for that green slush fund. How are we going to get a more accountable and transparent government? Do you think Carney's Liberals will be more accountable and transparent than Trudeau?
Couple things. One is, I mean, the RCMP in that kind of that when Parliament was stalled was because of the RCMP said they didn't want them to release the documents. They said that if there was a problem, they would request them. So that was kind of a stall tactic of an effective opposition leader, like we were saying, but not an effective prime minister. And so the next thing is that, Mark Carney has been, I think, in his time in the public sector, in the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, transparency and honesty and is a part of the job. And I think he takes a pragmatic approach to really disclosing to Canadians what the truth is when they need to know it, and what we're going to do to respond. And I think if we kind of narrow it down as well, and you look at the candidates that are running in this race, Stephen Fuhr was a member of Parliament, Tracy Gray was a member of Parliament. I think, to be truthful, Stephen Fuhr has the ability and has the record to show that, he's willing to stand up for Kelowna as well, regardless of what government is in power.
You brought up disclosure, and this is the question that's been pressed by Globe and Mail and pressed by CBC. Mark Carney will not disclose, and he says he's disclosed as much as he's willing to disclose, but he will not disclose his holdings in this blind trust fund. Do you think to settle Canadians' anxiety over that he should disclose? And then there's a lot of questions now coming about his ties with China. Do you think he should just disclose and be more open with Canadians? He's been caught also in that moving Brookfield 2 in which the CBC has said was a couch truth, right?
I mean, obviously, if you want to get in front of an issue, you get in front of it. And if there really is, nothing to, I think the frustration from, the Carney camp is that there's this idea that he's trying to hide something. It's not true.
So the way to get rid of that is just to disclose, though, isn't it? Isn't that the way to get rid of that?
The other response to say is like the way to get rid of it would be for here, Paul, you have to get a security clearance in NSCI.
I think on that one, I think you like Tom McClare. Tom McClare answered.
Yes.
He answered that question for you. So that he said that's a non-issue. That's just a mugging, and that is nothing that should be talked about. That security issue. That's just a red herring.
Here's the problem. I agree with that as well. I'm just bringing it up as an example as to how an issue can kind of become this red herring that realistically, Mark Carney disclosing any of his financial assets and so on and so forth. What is that going to do?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I'm an accountant as well, and conflict or perceived conflict of interest. Because he's making policy decisions. He's making policy decisions for Canada that are economic, that may or may not benefit Brookfield Asset Management. And so if Brookfield Asset Management benefits from climate change policies and he's making those policies, then we should know how that's benefiting. So that is the reason for the disclosure, right? Because when he says it's a blind trust, again, if he knows what he put into the blind trust, it's not very blind, right? Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's a trading account. It's different if he just put cash in and then these guys took the cash and invested in whatever. He didn't know what it is. He knows it's in Brookfield Asset Management. There you go. You can go and watch that full interview. It's about 45 minutes, and I thought it was a really good interview. We covered off quite a few things there. He definitely was stumping for the Liberals and stumping for local candidate here, Stephen Fuhr. And I've asked Stephen Fuhr for an interview several times through a proxy even and directly. And at first they agreed to it, and then Stephen Fuhr must have got a hold of it and said no. So we're going to keep pressing because I believe that candidates that don't want to get interviewed don't want to be held accountable, and that's not the way it works.
Indeed. Though we should say he did speak to Kent, didn't he? But yeah, I mean, maximum exposure should be. Oh, you should, as a sort of candidate, you should say yes to all media. Really, that would be my opinion. But yeah, I mean, this chap though, you've interviewed a few times, haven't you? I think he is very interesting. Lots of people might wonder, like, why would you interview somebody like that? But we've seen the NDP lose, it looks like almost like 50% of their support, and it seems like the reason, like we can say that based on analysis and surveys and so on, the reason seems to be that they're going over to the Liberals. And you know, he's a former candidate who actually ran in an election for the NDP, and he's in for the Liberals. So I think he's a very interesting kind of case to study.
Yeah, no, it's a really good interview actually. We covered off quite a few things, and I asked about Bill C-18 too. A lot of ring around the rosy for sure. A lot of ring around the rosy. But we would again like to speak with Stephen Fuhr. We did it in the provincial election. We interviewed all the candidates in long form and short form. Kent does the short form. I do the long form. I also interviewed all the leaders of the parties, and we interviewed Premier Eby. We interviewed John Rustad, Kevin Falcon when there was still a party there, and even Sonia Furstenau. And so we pride ourselves on getting the best election coverage. So again, we'll make an open request for Stephen Fuhr to come in and sit down with me.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be a good chat.
I'm sure it will be. There you go. Moving on to other stuff outside the election, Alberta nurses come up with a big deal for Alberta nurses. Big deal for sure. You got a 4-year deal, pay increase of 20%. And when we bring this up is because BC's struggling to staff hospitals. We talk about the ER closures all the time here. And the Alberta nurses, they get an immediate pay increase of 15% and an overall 20% over the 4-year deal. And yeah, they get a whole bunch of other things in this contract too. And I was talking to a nurse who I know, and she said it was a great deal for Alberta nurses. And it got a overwhelmingly support for ratification too. 95.74% ratified that new agreement. So Alberta gets a 4-year deal. Lots of stuff for nurses and doctors. So important right now in Canada's healthcare. So Alberta's stepping up and getting a 4-year deal for their nurses.
Yeah, I mean, BC is going to have to respond to that probably because they're about at the same rate right now, I think, hourly rate at least for the average sort of registered nurse. So if Alberta got surges ahead BC might be concerned about that because I mean there's quite a bit of traffic between those two provinces, isn't there, in terms of people moving jobs? So
Yeah, well, I know nurses that work in both provinces at the same time. So there you go. There you go. And again, they have to get their license in Alberta and in BC to work in both provinces. Again, something that should be straightened out. That's something that the Conservatives said they're going to fix, but we shall see.
I think Carney said that as well, didn't he? Even he promised, but we'll wait and see.
This is a Holly Dome Blacklock story. Canadian universities are targets of foreign agents determined to intimidate critics and scout recruits. There you go. And you've talked about this a lot, you know, even from your own personal experience, that this is going on. And again, the country they talk about is China. Canada's academic institutions rely on open, creative, collaborative environments to guide innovation and that, but on campus, foreign interference, some foreign intelligence services and government officials, including the People's Republic of China, can exploit this cultural openness to monitor and coerce students, faculty, and other university officials. Yeah, this not good. A lot of Chinese influence in Canada, for sure, from the People's Republic of China.
This has been going on for a very long time in universities. I mean, the Canada, just like the UK and the US and other Western countries, they kind of swung open their doors to students from overseas, and that's caused lots of problems. One of the problems that we're more familiar with maybe is the housing crisis. It did contribute to that, as Justin Trudeau himself explained and his best chum Mark Miller. But there's also this side of it, which is like, yeah, like obviously most of those kids, they're just going to be students, but a lot of them are, or some of them are also going to be kind of operatives of the Chinese Communist Party. That's just kind of how it works. The Chinese Communist Party has its fingers in absolutely every pie that you could conceive of in China. So obviously the students are affected by that too, and then they monitor them as well to make sure that they're not getting up to anything naughty when they're away and free in the West. So yeah, I mean, I think people sometimes they need to be reminded that China it's a totalitarian state. It's not a joke. It's not some sort of like cute little country that's past all that sort of stuff. It's finished with the Maoism and all the rest of it. It's like no, it's a dictatorship. It's the real deal. And lots of people in China live in fear of the Communist Party, and that's how it works. And it also applies when they come to Canada.
Yeah, China was the only country singled out in this briefing note. The threat posed by the People's Republic and its powerful security and intelligence apparatus, including malign activities targeting our democratic institutions, communities, and economic prosperity, remain a concern, said the foreign interference. So this is the thing. This is why Canada was just dropped here, saying he was going to turn over because they had a bounty out actually on one of our elected MPs, and they've had police stations operating here in Canada. They were part of that Wuhan lab thing in Winnipeg, and so much going on here. And I think the Liberal government has taken China's influence too lightly.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's happened. The reason that, in many ways, you could simplify and say the reason that Trump exists, even as a politician, and certainly the reason that he did the Liberation Day tariff regime malarkey the other day. The reason for all that is because of what you just said. Like people in the West didn't take China seriously, and that's like unfortunate because you should always take the Chinese seriously. It's a great civilization, packed full of extremely intelligent, competent people, but it wasn't really taken seriously, and it was just looked at as just like a third world country that you could kind of exploit. And Nike factories could go over there and make shoes, and like I just think it was treated like a joke, really, and it isn't. It's an extremely powerful country, and it pursues its own objectives ruthlessly. And sooner or later we're all gonna figure that out.
Yeah, and this is something that just came out Argentina in final negotiations with the U.S. to become the first zero tariff country, and that's supposed to take place next year. But again, if you sign a deal with Donald Trump like we did with the CUSMA, is the deal worth anything? Is it worth the paper it's written on? Not sure, but there you go.
That is very, very interesting though. I mean, if there's any truth to that, who knows if it's true.
It's all over X. Argentina's putting it out, and I mean it's not a done deal till it's done, but definitely this Milei guy has turned that country around from like a horrific economy to one that's positive. So
Well, there's absolutely no reason why Argentina shouldn't be a very wealthy country. It's got so much, like it's kind of got an embarrassment of riches in many ways. It's got like excellent farmland. It has quite a lot of natural resources. It has really good demographics, which is quite rare for a sort of westernized country. So there's no reason why Argentina shouldn't be like very, very rich. So maybe that's going to happen. Maybe we'll see that happen.
And Milei is famous for the chainsaw, and then that was Elon Musk. he actually gifted that same chainsaw or a similar chainsaw to Elon Musk, and then to the detriment of Elon Musk, that's been the left-leaning media has basically tried to roast Elon Musk for his chainsaw and stuff like that, where he's cutting what he calls fraud, waste, and abuse out of the federal government. Nobody wants to cut fraud, waste, and abuse in the government. They like their money wasted.
That's what Millet was arguing, yeah. And what he did was just quite hilarious. Some of his videos where he just had like these stickers on a board, and it was like it represented departments of the Argentinian government. And he's just like pulling them off and throwing them away, and he would say "afuera," which means like sort of he's like outside. Quite funny. He's like he is very Trump-like in the sense that he's just like a walking meme, just constantly like issues memes into the world.
But he has turned that economy around. The numbers say that. So there you go. And then a judge scraps unintelligible order to free self-possessed hitman claiming asylum.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely nuts. I would strongly recommend people read about it. But basically, for some mysterious reason, that there's kind of like these tribunals that exist, like immigration and refugee tribunals, and they get to decide whether people basically stay in Canada or not or in many cases when they've broken the law, like this person had. So this person had overstayed a visa. He'd been recorded saying that he was a hitman, talking about how to dispose of human bodies and how to kill people and what prices he charges and so on. And then he overstayed his visa, kicked out of Canada, and then he came back in February of this year saying, "I'm scared of Donald Trump, scared of all the, whatever, I'm scared of the Republican Party," or something like that, and claimed asylum. And then some genius on this tribunal decided that he was low risk and that he should be released. And then until the federal court saw that and said, "What are you doing?" and put him back in custody. But I mean, I feel like the story here is, why on earth do we have these tribunals? Why is somebody called Malika Muhammad, who I Googled, who used to work as a lawyer, a refugee lawyer, so she used to bat for the other side, so to speak, and then she was put in charge of whether or not somebody is granted asylum status. It's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like putting one of the prisoners in charge of the prison there, isn't it? A very, very peculiar policy.
Yeah, crazy actually. Russell Brand, charged with rape and sexual assault.
Naughty boy, but he's in America. I mean, I don't think it's particularly interesting that he's been charged with rape and sexual assault, because he was very widely considered to be a gigantic pervert when he was because he was a presenter, like a TV presenter in England.
Yeah, he was
many stories of his perverse behavior, which he's also spoken about himself. Yeah, in fact, he wrote a book about it where he detailed a lot of his degenerate acts. But what's interesting is that he's in the US. He's kind of like sought asylum in Donald Trump's America. That's what I find most interesting.
Yeah, he was heavily into drugs too, and was in the movies, a comedian and stuff like that, and very outspoken against the left as well. And he said that they've been working on getting charges against him for quite a while, and these charges go back to 1999 and 2005 involving 4 women.
Well, do remember though that Russell Brand, for most of his career, was a sort of noisy left winger, very
Yep.
left wing, and very aggressive about it. It's only in the last couple of years that he's decided that he's a right winger, and it happens to coincide with when he was accused of sexual assault. So make of that what you will. I don't know. Maybe that's a coincidence, or maybe it's not.
He wasn't into the COVID shots either. He was very outspoken on that, and definitely became targeted in that regard as well. We got a little bit of local news though for you. We got a video here from our journalist Kent Mulgat went out to talk to one of the councillors.
This past week, the mayor sent out a note to members of council reiterating something that I know has come up before, admonishing council to, in certain circumstances, not, speak to the media. That's us. So does he have a point that there are times when councillors are speaking when they shouldn't?
So what I would say is that all members of council and the mayor are all elected on our own right. So we are our own boss. The mayor isn't the boss of council. What we have to be cautioned about, though, as councillors, is before something comes before us on a Monday and it's debated or staff has presented.
There you go. You can go watch that full thing. I kind of signaled to Ronald not to cut it, but he cut it. But anyway, that's good. You can go watch that on Kelowna Now. Just talking about there's a thing out there thinking that the mayor is saying that the councillors can't talk, and so Loyal was out there talking. And ask Kent, did you ask Loyal if he asked if he got permission to ask if he could talk to Kent? And Kent said, "Oh, I should have asked that question."
Well, it's also like this connects to something else that we did, a story that we were heavily involved in, which was when Ron Cannon was chastised for writing an article for Kelowna Now because he had a column for a while.
Yep.
And that made kind of national news. They were talking, hilarious really in a way, but they were talking about it on kind of like these legal blogs or podcasts, I should say. Lawyers were like talking about it as a test case on how free councillors are and all the rest of it. So this is quite interesting. It's one of the rare occasions when Kelowna is actually at the center of a national story, even though maybe this one's a little bit more obscure.
Well, on to markets though. Donald Trump's crashing in the stock markets continues today. Another big down day, trying to beat yesterday's down day. So there you go. China's retaliated and is going to impose an additional 34% tariffs on American imports. So there you go. So this tariff war is escalating globally, and it's definitely not doing good for the stock. I did hear an interview with, I think it was a CNBC interview, where they asked Marco Rubio that Donald Trump is causing crashing of economies around the world. He said, "I'll correct you there. It's not crashing any economies. It's crashing the stock market. They're two different things. They may be related, but they are two different things. The markets," he said, "are going to need to adjust to the new world." So there you go. That was Marco Rubio. But again,
bad news for people that have stocks, though. So that it's not like it's not real life, and especially in the United States, it is very much real life because that's people's pensions. Like they're a big lots of retail investors in the US. And lots of pensions attached to the stock market. So I mean, it is real. Obviously, what Marco Rubio says is accurate. There, it's not the economy per se, but it is people's lives.
Yep, for sure. I mean, you can look at your wealth evaporate before your eyes, or you can look at it as the opportunity of a lifetime. Like if you think about Nvidia is down to $93 today, and recently it was as high as $153. So is it an opportunity to buy Nvidia when you didn't have that chance before, or is it the end of Nvidia? There's your question of the day, right? And we'll put up the market here. Actually, this was clipped a little while earlier. Right now, the markets are off 1,600 points as the Dow. We're talking about the Dow in general here. So the Dow is off right now 1,624 points. And our friend, the TSX here, the local thing, is off 1,000 points, right? So there you go.
And in the UK as well, they're absolutely pulling their hair out and panicking. The FTSE 100, which is the That's kind of like the main index in the UK. That's just it's just gone off a cliff,
And
really,
then,
which
and
is
then
a bit strange because the UK has got off relatively lightly. They got a 10% general tariff, but I
yeah.
suppose that's based on international trade rather than just UK-US trade.
And then usually people say, well, gold should be going up, and gold's selling off as well. But at times like this is what creates a liquidity crisis and actually exaggerates what's going on. So we get a liquidity crisis because a lot of stocks are bought on margin. And as stocks drop, margin calls happen. And then that means people have to sell stuff so that they can meet their margin calls. And a lot of the stuff they have to sell is, some of their better assets, gold, anything. Like they have to actually sell more stock to cover margins too. So we get margin calls. That's what kind of accelerates these sell-offs, right? So now that you're going to have a bunch of traders sitting on the sidelines, ready to jump back in and load up again. And typically, what happens in these things, we get a huge sell-off, and this sell-off is called for too. But again, you either have an opportunity, you see it as an opportunity, or you see it as the end of the world. You decide. Bitcoin selling off as well. Bitcoin right now, that $83,000 mark. It's kind of hanging on that 80 though, right? So there you go. Bitcoin hanging on to that $80,000 mark, chunking away there. Canadian dollar sold off as well. It had jumped up quite a bit there, and now it is falling off there. So it's just hanging on to that 70-cent mark right now, but who knows where it goes after that. And in our AI and tech world, AI, like China coming out with a lot of stuff, and somebody dug this thing up, and here's the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, talking about China and AI. And a lot of countries now banning Chinese AI, but here's Mark Carney speaking about Chinese AI.
The issues around the new industries, particularly around China's leadership in climate change and the further acceleration that's necessary for that, that's a crucial discussion, as is the discussion around AI and really the application of AI. We see China's leadership there in deployment of AI technologies, which is in many respects unique, and we can all learn from that and work together.
There you go. Many nations banning AI, Chinese AI, because they don't trust it. So there you go.
Also, China's leadership in climate change. I don't think it's the kind of leadership that he's talking about there, but it is indeed a leader in climate change. It is primarily responsible of all the countries for climate change. So there you have it. They put out the most emissions in the world.
Yeah, Mark Carney with lots of ties to China. I mean, we're seeing that. We talked about it yesterday, and a lot of that being reported in China, like you and I have been reporting for quite a while. China is really, like an adversary of Canada. We may have a tiff with the Americans, but China is the real adversary, and they've been operating like a foreign agent on our own soil for quite a while now.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, like Iran is also an enemy of Canada's, but the difference is that China has absolutely everything that we have in the West. Like theoretically, they have and more. They have a gigantic industrial economy. They have like great rivers and waterways. They have a load of land, load of farmland. Like they have a monopoly on mineral refining. Basically, they have a huge military. Like it's an extremely sophisticated country, and it's also a communist country. Part of their understanding of the world is that you have capitalists and you have communists, just like the good old days of Lenin and all the rest of it. And they look at Canada as a capitalist country, or like, imperialist. That's another word that they use. So it's built into the Chinese state ideology that countries like Canada are opponents, are adversaries, as you say. So it's like it's a nightmare combination in a way, because they're so powerful, they have so much going for them, plus they look at us as an antagonist. So yeah, I mean, they are a bigger issue than the Americans, and that should be obvious to anyone.
Yeah, it's surprising, that comment where China is the leading in climate change when Canada has sacrificed its wealth for the climate change agenda, and China has not sacrificed its wealth, and Xi Jinping has said that he will not sacrifice his people's wealth and prosperity in the name of climate change. He said he will do nothing that does anything that hurts the prosperity of the people of China.
Which is also what Trump said, and it's also what Modi of India has said. So that leaves, who does that leave in terms of polluters in the world? Not many, not many that matter.
Yeah, so Canada wanting to be the shining example and driving our economy into the ditch, to show the rest of the world how to do it, how to destroy a wealthy nation. How's that?
But somehow also simultaneously build up our military, even though we're sort of going to deindustrialize in the name of net zero, but also build our military somehow. It's an interesting one.
Here's another thing in these EV crazies. I mean, these people need to be stopped. It's just ridiculous. Somebody threw a large rock at a Tesla and it smashes through the windshield, seriously injuring a woman. Like, what is the matter with these people? They do stupid things. You need serious consequences. This needs to stop. Like, people are getting hurt. They're burning down property and everything because they believe they're justified for some kind of like agenda that they have. This is where the shrieking left has to stop losing its mind and thinking that they are the vigilante police of the world, and that they can do anything to anybody because of their cause is greater than any of the crime or hurt and pain they cause anybody.
Well, that could have killed someone, obviously, and also like a pregnant woman. It's
Like,
quite appalling, isn't it, to do that sort of thing?
How do they feel they are justified to do these types of things, right? Because they have such like rage for Elon Musk, and I don't know what, you know what I mean, like that they would go out and throw a rock through a windshield of a car.
Well, if that was intentional because it's a Tesla, if that's actually what happened, I mean, I suppose that would have to be decided by a court of law. But if that is what's happened, then I would suggest that the rationale would be something along the lines of Elon Musk is a literal Nazi, not an exaggeration, but is actually a national socialist of the sort of Hitler variety. He's going to destroy the whole world and kill everybody and kill people that aren't white or whatever. And he makes these cars. Therefore, we have to stop Hitlerism. We have to stop Nazism. And this is the problem with the rhetoric. When people are allowed to just freely believe nonsense like that Elon Musk is a Nazi or a racist or whatever else, if you allow people to think such extreme things, then there will always be some nutters that take it to its logical conclusion, its logical sort of extreme, and follow through on that. Because, you know, if you try and put yourself in their sort of heads, if you genuinely believe that the richest man in the world is a Nazi, like an actual sort of, like he goes home and sort of like thinks positive thoughts about Adolf Hitler and all the rest of it, then you're going to do some pretty wacky things, aren't you? If you think that he's trying to take over the world as well, and that he has a strong relationship with the president of the United States and all this kind of thing, you're going to act out, aren't you? So I think really this has to be dealt with on a rhetorical level, and people have to be told, stop being stupid. Elon Musk isn't a Nazi. Stop being a moron and come and join us in reality. And that would be the best thing to do in a situation like this, I reckon.
Yeah, the Democrats in the U.S. are reluctant to stop it, though. Like, I mean, some of them even encouraging it. And I think, you know, like there should be charges for look, Tamara Lich, charged with mischief, right? And how long has she spent in jail, and how long is her court case still going on? That's what these people are being charged with, mischief. And they're actually causing harm to people and property, right? And what did the truckers do in Ottawa? You know, made some noise violation.
Yeah, well, that's what's happened to her and the other fella, Pat King. That's a classic example of the process is the punishment, you know.
Yeah.
Even though you get done, they've been convicted for mischief, which is pretty feeble sort of offense, really, isn't it? But their real punishment isn't to be convicted of mischief. Their real punishment is to have been in and out of the courts for, what's it now, 4 years?
Well, how long did she
mean,
spend behind bars, right?
Yeah, that is the punishment. The punishment is the process. And I mean, that's like, it's very ugly
It'll
to
be
see that
interesting.
happen, rather than just to deal with her on her own on the terms of her, you know, crime or supposed crime. Deal with it on those terms rather than this kind of extrajudicial bollocks.
It'll be interesting to see what this mischief charge leads to compared to what she got, because this is, in my mind, worse than, like honking your horn. Anyway.
Well, I mean, that's again a rhetorical thing, though, isn't it? Because that was represented as though it was basically like a coup, like a coup attempt or something along those lines, and it was about attacking Canada's democracy and all the rest of that. That was the rhetoric that surrounded that.
According to some of the Liberals, including who's now invited back into the circle, Marco Mendocino, that it was basically a January 6th moment. And even Mark Carney wrote to that. We talked about it on the show, that it was similar to a January 6th event for these people are looking to overthrow democracy by using horns. I know that Canada's military is not that strong, but I'm not sure if a bunch of horns could have overthrown the Canadian government.
Yeah, and I mean, we could go on and talk about that for a very long time, but I think one of the main reasons that spiraled to sort of out of control, I don't know if it really did go completely out of control, but the reason that worsened is because Justin Trudeau refused to parley, didn't he? He refused to speak to them. That's what you do. I mean, throughout history, pretty much, that's what you do. So if lots of angry citizens come to the capital and they seek redress of their grievances, you speak to them. I mean, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? But Trudeau like ostentatiously refused to even sit down with them and speak to them, and I think that's what made that so much worse.
I think, again, the Liberal Party used that to the benefit of the Liberal Party to gain more power as well. They used the emergency powers too. Anyway, let's get to our comedy section, although our whole show might be comedy to some people. And this one's so true of the COVID years, right? My circle over the years. I don't even think I have a dog left in my circle, so there you go.
That's a shame. That's a particularly lovely little dog, that, isn't it? A little Yorkshire Terrier there. They're very friendly.
We just lost our Pom Shih Tzu mix. He's was around for about 15 years, and he went off to join our Nana in the sky there. So he's looking after our pets. So there you go.
Get yourself a Yorkie then.
I think I'm beyond the pet. My daughter has got a Great Dane living with us right now, so that's enough. It's a small horse. A small horse.
Probably bigger than a Shetland pony or whatever.
Here we go, and it's talking about heaven, though. The Babylon Bee out with their Heaven unveils special VIP lounge for people who went to Wednesday night church. So there you go. So the perks available for the people that are more devoted than the people that are just showing up every Sunday or once a year or what have you. You're going to get that special treatment once you get up there.
That's a very American sort of capitalistic view of paradise there, isn't it?
Well, hey, it's competing for people. You gotta throw out the perks, right? Because right now there's a lot of competition for people. There's atheism, and then there's whatever. There's a lot of like even other types of worship too. So you gotta check out the perks, right? This must be our Bible day or something, because we got another one here. Bible scholars believe Noah made 977 trips to Home Depot during our construction, so they'll add for Home Depot there, right? And you're a new homeowner. It's tough, right? Like you're back and forth to the home hardware stores or whatever you want to call them, Home Hardware, Home Depot, Rona, and the rest of them, right?
Yeah, and it's an awful lot of making mistakes, not knowing what you're doing, and listening to some random geezer in, Montana or something like that on YouTube showing you how to do something.
Then let's buy Canadian Home Depot, not Canadian owned. And then Rona used to be Canadian, no longer owned by Canadian company either, now owned by Lowe's. But they never did change the branding. They talked about changing that branding, but they decided to stick with the Rona brand. I think Home Hardware is one of the Canadian brand, like lots of them locally owned and operated. And then there's obviously our friends at Canadian Tire, but I don't think they sell lumber yet, eh?
Justin Trudeau's favorite, isn't it? That's where he gets his spatulas.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau having to cook for himself. There was a question
Just
in
imagine him there flipping an omelette.
there was actually a question in French when he was in Montreal, I guess, from Mark Carney on if he knew the price of strawberries. And in his typical elitist things, he said he didn't know because he has staff that buys his strawberries.
Mm,
Hey,
I'm
do you
sure.
have
Yeah.
do you have staff that buy your strawberries? But
Unfortunately, not. No.
but
Maybe if we
according
can create some kind of caste system, get in more illegal immigrants like they were trying to do in the US, so that they can have their own servant class.
but
Maybe then.
according to many of the people that are trying to promote Carney as the average everyday Canadian, when he's out there drinking in the pub and out there like playing hockey and all that kind of stuff, as the average Canadian that everybody can relate to. And then he answers like, I think he probably, if that's where he was going to do a couch truth, that might have been the time to say, I don't know, I think they're too much, as opposed to say, oh, I have staff for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a certain amount of naivety there involved in that, isn't there? Because obviously, like the thing is, like Pierre Polyev, probably almost 100% certain here, doesn't go and buy his own strawberries either, or really know how much they cost. But Pierre Polyev is smart enough, and he's kind of shrewd enough as a politician to have one of his little servants come with a piece of paper with a list of the price of bread and milk and all the rest of it on it, and then you memorize that, and that's kind of like that's kind of part of your job as a politician. You should know that sort of thing. But I mean, yeah, this is the reality. Is I was happy that question was asked, because I feel like that should be asked much more often. And I also think other questions should be asked, like, when was the last time you did your laundry? Like, when was the last time you did your own laundry? And I would imagine that for the members of the Canadian elite, the answer to that question is probably about 25 years ago.
So how you're asking for the average person to vote for you, and you don't even understand where the average person is. It's kind of like when Chrystia Freeland was asked about the costs of having a vehicle in that, and the cost of the carbon tax, and she said, I don't even have a vehicle. She doesn't even think that she drives around in a chauffeur-driven limousine, that everything for her is paid for, and where the average family is struggling. And I think this is where this elitism comes into play. They don't even realize that they're elites, and that's the thing. And is, how do you connect with the common person if you don't even know what the common person is feeling? And there's an old saying, the king needs to walk amongst its people. And I don't think he has or is willing to.
Yeah, and there's also, like, the God science has even weighed in on this. And there are studies that show that people who are like extraordinarily wealthy, like crazy wealthy, like $80 million net worth, $150 million net worth, whatever, they've done studies on these people who, because of their social circle, because they hang around with billionaires and stuff like that, they are under the impression that they're actually not doing very well financially, that they're actually kind of, they're not very wealthy. They're kind of like, oh, I'm doing okay. Like, but it skews your perception of reality. If you hang around with people who are billionaires and multimillionaires and all the rest of it, you're not really a part of the ordinary world. And I think that's what that's indicative of, isn't it? With Carney and other members of the elite who've stumbled on questions like that. It shows that they aren't really a part of the sort of Canadian people in that sense. They're above them. They're outside of the normal world.
Misty, one of our regular viewers, said that her husband must be an elite because she does his laundry. Well, my wife must be an elite. I've been doing the laundry forever. I think ever since we've been together. I do the laundry. There you go.
It is true, though, isn't it? Laundry. I'd love to ask that question of maybe we can ask Pierre Poilievre that question when he's in the Okanagan. When was the last time you did your laundry, Pierre? What temperature did you put it on?
There you go. And then here's the last meme of the day, and I think this one is great. That AI, obviously, and so it looks like JD's been having maybe a little bit too many of those strawberries, or maybe too many donuts, not sure what, but he looks a little puffy, or maybe he got bee stung, because he doesn't usually look that puffy. But JD Vance there saying, after the stock market crash, have you said thank you once? And I mean,
JD, this anaphylactic shock version of JD Vance is he's become like a meme character. I don't know if you've observed, but like he's all over the internet, and you get that one where he's got like the curly hair, and then there's the other one where he's got no hair and he's got no eyebrows. for some reason, JD Vance is like very memeable, and this is one of the this like version of JD Vance is very popular. But
Well,
yeah, I think this is he set himself up with that, hasn't he? Like, have you
uh,
said thank you once?
the stock market is looking to find new lows. Like it's just definitely accelerating on the way down, and that's what happens when you get these things. So again, opportunity or what? You never know, right? And to me, I see opportunity in these windows. So, and this is where fear is where cowards go to die. There's your slogan of the day. Fear is where cowards go to die.
What you should do is follow the actions of the greatest stock market virtuosi of all time, people like Warren Buffett. Like he'll come out of this on top, as he always does. And then other great wizards of the stock market, like Nancy Pelosi. I bet you she does all right out of this as well.
Now that's actually Elon Musk is the meme of the century too. A lot of YouTubers are now infiltrating these Tesla protests and just asking questions. Some of them are pretty funny, right? Because these people are just shrieking and screaming. They don't even know what they're shrieking and screaming about, right? They just say utter nonsense and screaming. They don't even know what they're doing. And they don't even know why they're standing there. And I guess there's accusations that many of them are being paid to go to these protests and cause and wreak havoc.
Down with Nazis. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess and it could get worse because the Doge team has set its sights on congressmen and women that have made boatloads of money, and they're going to try and figure that out. And I guess they recovered a terabyte of data or something of that, because when the Biden administration left the government, they kind of like wiped some servers out. Interesting times, eh?
It's incredibly weird that the people that make laws in the United States and have access to intelligence and all the rest of it, like they have access to more information than basically anybody else on the planet. It's nuts to me that they're like totally free to trade on the market in any way that they choose. And there've been so many times when they've all known that something's coming, like a tariff, let's say, or whatever it is, and then a month later they reveal their financial information, and it reveals that they invested according to that information. I mean, how many times now has that happened? They just it's just standard behavior now. I find it astonishing that they let them do that.
Yeah, there's so many things that it seems like some of the congressmen and women have had insider type information, and like their spouses or partners have made a killing in the stock market. And yet, Martha Stewart, I don't know if you remember, Martha Stewart spent some time in jail for a little bit of insider information where I think she made like 20 grand or something on it. And they punished her to the utmost with that one, right? So again, it's kind of like the Tamara Lich thing, mischief charges. We're going to basically destroy her life. And then let's see what happens with this person that threw a rock through the windshield of a Tesla and harmed a pregnant woman.
Yeah, seriously hurt her apparently. So that's absolutely a tragic story, that one.
There you go. I think more attention needs to be put onto these Chinese connections and see where this all goes, and disclosure. Again, I recommend you go and watch that interview I did with Cade Desjardins. I actually asked Cade to sit in our on election night. We're going to do election night. We're going to be here April 28th. I asked him if he wanted to sit on the panel. It seems how he can represent the left. I said no shrieking though.
Well, that's it. He's a good lad, isn't he? He doesn't shriek or anything like that, and he's he can actually have a conversation, which is to his credit. I think there's probably a reasonable chance that he will become an MP at some point. He's doing the right thing, isn't he? He's training to be a lawyer, which is like basically what you have to do these days if you want to be a politician.
Yeah, our friend here in British Columbia, Premier Eby, is a lawyer.
Yeah. He was a very left-wing activist lawyer as well.
He needs some ideas, and maybe we'll call him up and offer some ideas, because definitely we want to see a better British Columbia. So there you go. That's our show for today. We hope that you like and subscribe, follow, do all those things on all our social channels. We appreciate that. And we're back Monday, and we're on here 5 days a week around 9 a.m. We try to do, and our show's just over an hour. Today's a long one, though, an hour and a half. We kind of like dilly-daddled around a bit, but there you go. We thank you for watching Now Media Group.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.